Hello everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Adam Wolfond. I am 21 years old and an MA student of Fine Arts at Concordia University. I am hoping to change the way we think about collaboration and study in my work that is all about how facilitation is mutual and necessary when we think of mutual inclusion versus an inclusion without the mutuality. I am your keynote speaker today who wants to talk to you in a different key. I like to think of philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari and what they call the minor. The idea of the minor can be considered as an oppressed minority or the minor way of composition and form. Although I have to talk in a way you will understand, there is a tension for me between writing in the pace you are familiar with and then writing in a relational pacing form that is easier for me. So to begin rhythming, I want to share a poem I wrote with you called Arrows of Bathing Stimmying Dancing Pacing. Mostly, I want to rake in the people. To understand the ways of pacing real thoughts. The feeling way. Pace, pace, pace the talking. And type, type, type the thinking. And the two will rally. And become. Pace names the ways of thinking. And typing feels the ways of pacing. Every string games. The perfect love and movement. In real relation. With inspirational rights. Of people like me. Having the lust dancing and giving life to feel. The names of categories dancing. Out of bounds. Is amazing to play. And I get a thrill guessing the way people will respond to me and my open languaging. Language is the pavement answering the way, and I am the water, bathing and living lustfully. Main idea in the arrows of autism is the pace. Dancing so I feel fantastic, like rallying ocean waves, carrying me like a boogie, bored of puttering, on top of the warm water. Mind is lavishing in the ideas in the arrows. Pacing. Give me some examples. Love the power I have been bathing autistically. And living stimmying dancing. The pacings. Opening that field of thinking toward artful liberation. From people who think autism is a problem. And janitors of diversity. Live in that world. Where simple cleanup is bigger problem. Lusting real ludicrous idea. That we need clean perfect people. I fastly make need. Jumping always. On the page. The artworks you see in this presentation are the arrows of autism jumping, ticking, dancing. These are the collaborative works we experiment with at our studio in Toronto, Canada, called Disassembly. We experiment together to think about support, or what I call buttressing, that holds up different ways of movement, creation and form that come together in a poetic languaging and material art making. We are interested in the processes of relation where collective creativity emerges because it is important to make visible the facilitations and relations that make collaborative work possible. Working with many others as collaborators and mentors have made this rally joyful for me. Edouard Glissant calls a poetics of depth that are not like vertical extensions, like linearity or the idea of progress or even transcendence, but a poetics of the abyss, and he challenges what we think is a stability of knowledge that is represented in a flat language. He says that poetics of a language within itself can only be exercised within the limits of language. He talks about a chaos mind that is only chaotic if we believe that there is an order, and I think of this as a neurotypical order. In contrast, embrace of the chaosmon recognizes that the relation expresses in many forms. He writes that the poetics of relation senses, assumes, opens, gathers, scatters, continues, and transforms the thought of these elements, these forms, and this motion. These poetics of glisten resonate with me and how we have come to overthink in neurotypical literary ways. But a poetics of relation senses with multiple bodies that I call the atmospheres. Atmospheres are the human and more than human facilitators that call me to answer and that answer my call. This can be anything like attuning to the wisp of wind that shifts our direction, or a mood, an object, a sentence, a thought, a way of pacing. Everything co-composes with the atmospheres that become the languaging in both my writing and my expressive body. I am curious how autistic bodies are classified often as non-relational and unaware because we move, think, and language differently. I am told I've developed my own lexicon that comes naturally to me, so I will try to open up the many meanings that come to mind when I reuse certain words in my languaging to shift your orientations, or anchor you for a moment in the undulating meanings. The more than human atmospheres are important to think about for an attunement to the relational pacing that buttresses me and others. Relational pacing can also be referenced as the facilitation of facilitation, meaning that we support each other. I use relational pacing to think about how collaboration happens together and how we all influence each other's thinking and work, or how someone can help me sustain a movement and how I might move them. There is something important in the way we buttress one another that gets overlooked in therapeutic methods imposed on autistic people. When we read a book, we are influenced by that thinker. When I am by the water, it influences a way of sentencing and feeling thinking. When we think of facilitation as mutual support, we are rethinking the hierarchical forms of care that have been co-opted by capitalism and the rehabilitative professions. These ways of thinking about mutual support and collaboration are key to how we rethink autism so we don't use normopathic ideas of disorder that have been harmful to many autistics like me. This will include ideas that therapists remove themselves relationally from their clients in order to maintain what is deceivingly called objectivity. There is no possible way that we can support by removing ourselves from the relation. In fact, in order to live, I bathe in life and all that moves within. This is why I think that how we express in languaging ways, wanting ways, and ways with the artful atmospheres are a part of the concept of mutual inclusion. The language can reveal the movements and connections in their pacing. If my mom corrected my ways of writing, I probably would have stopped writing. Relational pacing and techniques that support neurodiversity are processes that we experiment with in our studio that is about more than making an art object. We are not outcome-oriented like many methodologies purport to be. Processes reveal the in-between, the liminal, the relational moves that methods can't describe. People say I am a poet, but I have always written in my wanting ways that language is relationally. When I was little, I bathed in the words that didn't represent a thing, but contained many movement and sensory feelings. My mom, Estee Clark, who is supporting me today, recognized that my interest in language was different from other children who use language in instrumental ways that people called joint attention. As she learned to support me, she let me follow my own ways of writing. These wanting ways are unwanted and excluded from mainstream society and from high art places because people want succinct answers and project-oriented results. This really limits what we can do together if we follow project and outcome-oriented methods. So if inclusion means that I have to be like others, and write and move, sit still, comply, look you in the eye, in the so-called right form to be included, then it is not inclusion. Inclusion needs to embrace other ways of moving, relating, and knowing. It's more than using the master's tools to take the master's house down. It's making new relations and connections altogether. Language is a way to understand each other, but it is also reductive in the ways that it is abstract and non-sensuous, and open writing like mine as movement tends to be ignored as autistics are forced to neurotypical ways of seeing, moving, and communication. This can be painful for many autistic people, even talking autistics. The thinking around artistic practices and pace intensifies our invention of forms. Similarities with open processes are languaging for me the way of water as I feel the patterns and paces of the moving relation, the support around me, the demand of my white screen, my hesitating flowing index finger. These feel like intensities that come in waves. You can say and when you speak, but my hesitations show up in the pacing of my body. I hope that others can attune deeply to autistic writing, which has many different forms, and take time to bathe in diverse ways. I have written some of these ways in my book The Wanting Way and my new collection, Open Book in the Ways of Water, coming out this summer. Water is the game of ways and patterns that wave and ripple and can pull us under. The game is to keep up with neurotypical language or to play my own game. General talk is about surfacing, but languaging my way is about feeling. Moving the ways that water makes are having variances, moving the thresholds in a thinking-feeling rally that comes from leaving the neurotypical grammars out, and that is the way of perception that is cut by many neurotypically inclined people and systems. We need art to dance this moving, jamming, improvising relation. Man of Autism answers the ways of the body much of the time, and that means my body rallies with the artful atmospheres that are dancing me, and the real feeling can dance the atmospheres as my body presence and pace shifts other bodies to be free. Many people feel this at disassembly, a space and pace where we don't hide, but create with our differences. These tensions can be a buttressing that works when it is not a forced method for movement. Having a ticking body in a neurotypically conceived world is making my dance about disorder, but really it is about a different and diverse way of languaging with many feelings, bathing and immersing, and I don't have any other way. Many neurodiverse people like me who cannot speak physically or move sometimes without support continue to be excluded. Conditions for inclusion will never change if ideas about it don't meet the needs of many of us. It is not enough to say we are including neurodiversity, because this often falls back on how people think support is mostly guided by a non-disabled person within a mindset and system of neurotypicality that is also colonialist. I think it is now important to avoid normopathic narrative and form if it doesn't fit our ways of expression. Ideas about mutual inclusion must meet our actual thinking in the way we need each other. The way the getting and the giving are beholden to feel the rally that is always forming. The rally is an important word in my lexicon. The rally is the feeling and moving and pacing and talking that languages in a deciding step that makes a sentence, a thought, a work of art, a dance. It is the rally that I am most interested in, and the way it carries collective thinking that supports both me and also non-autistic people open to the rally. The rally catches the flow of the many movements and feelings we have when we are sensing, telling, showing, and thinking together. The rally also lets the movements flow and flounder, like the disassembling. The rally acknowledges the neurodiverse forms that move, meander, hesitate, spiral, tick, hum, hide, bolt, weave, twallow, wave, and blur. The rally is the more than being, it is becoming collective in the wanting. Wanting ways are like desire lines that move in the autistic ways we want. Different ways of moving are attuned to multiple relational rallies. Some autistic people call this an attention to detail. This attention feels like a forge in my eyes and body. I like the word ecoproprioception that integrates the body with other bodies that influence each other, environment, bodies, moving and sensing. I feel my body with other bodies. None of us can exist alone. To feel my body is to feel with and alongside others, sometimes feeling like tendrils trying to find a way. I don't know how I could feel my body without touching another body, and touching can be waving a stick that grounds me or to edit the detail that is constantly moving. Touching can be a hand on my back. Touching can be shoulder to shoulder or a reassuring whisper. I think it's dangerous when we demonize touching as this is one way I need support to live. I think we have to remember the difference between a touch of force and a touch of support. We are not individual, but a collaborative body touching in relation like the collaging of body, minds thinking, feeling together. We think with the atmospheres, and the atmospheres think and move with us. Buttressing is the name I dance with to bear these heavy feelings, that if I don't get help with, I am ceaselessly offering meanings in constant flux that most people don't want. Running thoughts are always disassembling in a ceaseless flow, and the typing, like talking, asks us to catch them. Notice how most people talk the same words, the same tone, the same rhythms? It is easier for many to use words as a code that people don't really think about, and I can't offer you a quick code for how to support autistic people because we have always practiced it every day as a process. Our processes reveal the techniques that we may gather but not use as a tried and true method. Processes always change. Usually I can type at my keyboard, but what happens if my body freezes? Being open to the disassembling is the open way of support that knows the movement is key to counter-movement, that the rhythmic whisper incites a pace, that the freeze is all about the movement in the process of moving. To write these running thoughts in this form for you today, my support assistant sits with me, enveloping me in a way that carries my desired movement to the QWERTY board. We are dancing the movement together as she is familiar with my ways of moving writing. I wish that more people would see the writing as a body expression with the atmospheres, with my hesitating movements that I cannot hide, and in my typing relation. I am all about the disassembling, the moving, the deterritorializing, the non-narrating forms, the languaging, and not hiding my ways of expression or need for support to make neurotypical sense or to falsify some neurotypical idea of agency and independence. I think we need more neurodiverse experiments and expressions that don't answer the call of neurotypical grammars that tear us, the object and subject, apart. The sensing relating expresses differently when we make visible the hesitations, hums, stims, ticks, supports, that are informing different patterns, the moves that are the cohesive bodying. The ears of the world tune in on the rhythm of sameness, but the sameness is the so-called deviance. I invite you to feel the ways we can see and dance the world that languages many paces in sensing, and after this recorded part of my keynote in a different key, I invite your questions so we can experience these different paces together. We can jam in the rally of relation. So I think it is important to say that mutual inclusion is the antithesis of inclusion as we know it. It is an idea that we need each other, so the way I support my friends and family is through a shifting of pace that marries the languaging form to the thinking, feeling, moving that wants and offers more interesting, tilted orientations. Facilitation is the way I support others to make art alongside me. Sometimes an idea in a poem or the way I language will invite a poetry, a weaving way, wrapping my synesthetic experience and tactile objects I use into a work. In the series we call Poetries, I needed to carry the limbs of trees to ground me during the pandemic. I carried them home with me. My mom and I began to weave in my treasured STEM objects, rubber bath toys, my sensory tools like Tabasco bottles, and colored cloth to materially think about intertwined synesthetic and proprioceptive experiences that aren't static but moving. Languaging my way is like this, a way of integrating all the aspects of my existence that neurotypical thinking wants me to quiet down, as in to be still, and separate from the moment of the moving feeling. I can't describe what green tastes like. I can't tell you that my mom's perfume smells like the category jasmine. Sensing is more than one channel. Synesthesia and proprioception also collaborate to language a sentence or body expression that describes more than one sense. And the way of thinking moves into the atmospheres through resonance. Other people who collaborate with us have integrated weaving and wrapping objects into their own work. These are the desire lines we follow in art collaborations that include how we engage the idea of inclusion, support, neurodiverse perception and movement, and yes, even typing support. We attune to the inflections that become important moments of facilitation that move with me and the rallying atmospheres. This simultaneously dances a need to exorcise the hierarchical meaning of facilitation, giving way to the language that dear people use when they think that autistics should explain themselves and deduce some meaning of autism, or type in neurotypical narratives to be considered intelligent and aware. But there is no meaning except diversity. That should be how we dance the difference that is assembling all the time. Let's talk more about getting more support for making easy ways for how languages can give alternative ideas that much of the world wants but doesn't use. Collaboration at disassembly faces the need to make learning accessible as a way of gathering and studying together, while also making the art of expression a way to think about the knowledge autistics have to share and facilitate. These are the new calls for neurodiversity to gather others for offerings of different perspectives. I think of it as meaning the same thing for indigenous people and plant people and animal people and water people and cosmic people. There are no alone autistic aliens in the multiverse. Autistic expression is the way that opens the doors to neurodiverse freedom, and this is more than having a need to communicate in forms that we are taught to mean something. Categories limit meanings. Go to the music in the way that the avant-garde goes, the desire lines that don't move in a straight line. Sometimes the ways of ticking and tapping and waving a stick I call twallowing is embodying with the world. I don't see how this is a disorder, except that I am all for dysregulating neurotypicality. At disassembly, we make visible our many ways of buttressing each other as an important part of our collective work. Our way of thinking about relational pacing, or the facilitation of facilitation, needs a collaging with others. When we think of relation, we imagine a relation between each individual, but the autistic relation is all about the in-between, or what is called liminal, a blurring of lines, a moving with the atmospheres with the fullness of the living field that cannot be cut. But neurotypical imaginings parse the in-between, this fullness, for efficiency. The ways I am answering is a prerequisite, pacing to the wants of capital, but in the way I write, I vary the dance of sequencing grammars that are otherwise picking apart bathing autistic persons. The way of gaming spaces of autistic creation and grammars is pacing the way of arrangements that can be made like affluxes, and openings are the ways people describe it even when the call to reduce meaning must answer. Openings are the ways I hear people describe it, but making and typing bathes in the artful atmospheres, languaging together in the dance of collaboration. I like the word bathe because it immerses everything as an alternative to using the word immanence. Opening to the in-between is a real way to think about making language that is poetic, but immanence is the chic way I've heard it described to mean that calls in the pace of the atmospheres condition the assembly of words. Hard work of typing the words out to let others into my way of pacing names concepts that I already can feel. It is hard to type in your language, but I have made the effort. So I ask you to come to my way of moving so facts about our own ways of responding to academic calls for submission, and the hard ways of capital can make way for autistic expression. Feel that way of moving with and alongside varied paces that difference brings. Feel the way our collaborative art offers other knowledge, and then feel if names and categories that we call words are enough. I am thinking about creating a work that feels what is being imposed on autistic bodies as knowledge that can liberate us from naming things like autism, identity, agency, individual, or anything that signifies neurotypically at all. Even those words competence and intelligence are abstract. They are imposed on our bodies as a fact rather than a social construction. These concepts are neurotypical in the sense that it cuts off the relations that we need to live. Poetic relation as my way of writing brings understanding toward the relation with the environment, with the eco-proprioceptive relation that is impossible to eliminate. People need to understand that proving competence is not the goal of typing, writing poetry, studying, or making art. Proving competence for speakers should not have to involve always responding, writing, and reading in a neurotypical form. I do not feel a need to prove my competence or announce my independence or individualism because I am not individual. I am not the isolated autistic. Relational processes impress the importance of discovering the many techniques that support neurodiverse people and how we support other people. I think these relational autistic forms can bring deeper understanding about support and facilitation, and also how a neurotypical conception of what a body should do limits what we can actually do as autistics. Just bat for my way, our way, of assembly, and change the ways we liken ourselves to the making of sameness. We must vary the paces of making life together. Thank you for listening, and I invite you to please rally in conversation with me. Bring on your questions.